No one expected it, not the fans, not the media, not even those closest to him. When King Yaman finally broke his silence and spoke about Sara, his words didn't come with anger or bitterness. Instead, they came with something that stunned everyone: gratitude. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I should thank him." Those 5 words were enough to stop the world for a moment. Because everyone knew who him was: Sara's ex-husband. The man who had once been a shadow in her past but somehow managed to destroy what she and Ken had built together. For months, rumors had swirled around their breakup: hidden messages, jealous confrontations, phone calls at midnight, and that one moment that changed everything. But no one ever imagined that Ken would look back at that chaos and choose to be thankful. He had every reason to be angry. The relationship had started beautifully. 2 people from different worlds who somehow spoke the same emotional language. Their chemistry had been undeniable, it lit up every room they entered together. But love, as Ken learned, can be fragile when the past refuses to stay buried. Sara's ex never truly left her life, not emotionally, not entirely. There were whispers that he still called her, that he still tried to influence her decisions, that he couldn't stand seeing her move on. And little by little, those whispers turned into doubts. For Ken, who valued loyalty above all else, it became unbearable. He didn't want to control her, he only wanted peace. But peace is impossible when ghosts from the past keep knocking on your door. There was a moment, a private confrontation no one saw, when Ken realized the truth. The love he was fighting for wasn't the same love he had started with. It had changed. It had been poisoned by insecurity, by interference, by the heavy weight of things left unsaid. So he walked away. Not because he stopped loving her, but because he couldn't keep fighting shadows. Months passed. The pain dulled but never disappeared. The world kept talking about him, about how strong he looked, how cold he seemed, how focused he was on work. But inside, he was rebuilding. And then, in an interview that no one saw coming, he said it: "I should thank him. Because he destroyed something that wasn't meant to last. And in doing so, he saved me." The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. Those words weren't bitter, they were freeing. For the first time, Ken wasn't speaking from pain. He was speaking from peace. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't pride. It was acceptance. The kind that comes only when you've truly healed. The next morning, headlines exploded across Europe. Ken Yaman thanks the man who destroyed his relationship? The sentence appeared everywhere, translated, twisted, dissected. Some thought he was being ironic. Others believed it was his way of hiding pain behind pride. But those who truly knew him, they saw something different. They saw a man who had finally found clarity. In the chaos of fame, it's easy to forget that behind every headline is a human being. For Ken, this wasn't just another breakup, it was a lesson written in heartbreak. Sara had entered his life when he least expected it. Radiant, unpredictable, full of energy. She brought warmth into his world, a light that reminded him of simplicity. And for a while, it worked. They laughed, they dreamed, they escaped from everything the cameras represented. But the past has a cruel way of returning when you think it's gone. Sara's ex-husband, a name that Ken had tried to ignore, started to reappear. Not physically at first, but through words, through doubts, through subtle reminders of old wounds. Ken felt it in her tone, in her silences, in the distance that slowly grew between them. One night, after a long argument that neither of them wanted to have, Sara said something that broke him completely: "He knows me better than you do." It wasn't meant as an attack, but it cut deeper than she could imagine. In that moment, Ken realized that no matter how much he gave, there was a part of her heart he would never reach. Not because he wasn't enough, but because someone else had already written his name in a chapter she hadn't closed. He left her apartment that night without another word. The next morning, his car was seen leaving the city. For weeks, he disappeared, no appearances, no interviews, no posts. Just silence. And that silence was where his healing began. He started walking through small towns, staying in quiet hotels where nobody recognized him. He read again, wrote again, tried to understand what love really meant. And more importantly, what it shouldn't cost. It was in that solitude that he realized something profound. Sometimes, the person who hurts you isn't your enemy. They're your lesson. And sometimes, the one who destroys your love actually saves you from yourself. That's why, when he finally returned to the spotlight, his eyes were calmer. He didn't speak with anger, and he didn't hide behind pride. When a journalist asked him about Sara's ex-husband, he simply smiled and said, "I should thank him. He made me see what I refused to see." It wasn't a headline for him. It was closure. The man who had once been his rival had unknowingly freed him from a love built on nostalgia and fear. And for Can, that realization was liberation. When Can returned to the city, it felt as if the world had been waiting for him. Paparazzi crowded the airport, flashes lit up the night, and his name echoed once again across headlines. But the man walking through those airport doors wasn't the same Can Yaman who had left months ago. The anger was gone. The fire in his eyes had turned into calm determination. He had lost something, yes, but he had also gained something no one could take away: peace. His first interview took place in a quiet studio in Milan. No bright lights, no scripted questions. The journalist, visibly nervous, asked the question everyone wanted to hear: "Can, do you really mean it? You thanked Sara's ex-husband for destroying your relationship?" He smiled softly, leaned forward, and said, "Yes. Because sometimes you can't see the truth when you're too close to it. He forced me to open my eyes." The audience watching from home was silent. For the first time, Can wasn't defensive or bitter. He wasn't trying to rewrite the story, he was simply telling his truth. He explained how love, when mixed with fear, can become a cage. How sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. He admitted that he had held on to something that wasn't real anymore. That he had fought to save a connection that was already slipping through his fingers. And he confessed that it took another man's interference for him to realize that he deserved more than half-hearted love. The interviewer asked if he still loved Sara. He hesitated for a moment, then answered quietly, "A part of me always will. But loving someone doesn't mean you should stay with them. Sometimes love needs distance to stay pure." Those words went viral within minutes. Fans flooded social media with clips of his calm expression, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. Some called it maturity, others called it heartbreak, but everyone felt it. And somewhere, far from the cameras, Sara watched that interview too. Those who knew her said she couldn't hold back tears. Not because he had blamed her, but because he hadn't. Can had chosen grace over revenge. Forgiveness over bitterness. The next day, a short message appeared on Sara's Instagram story. It wasn't addressed to anyone by name, but everyone knew who it was meant for. Sometimes the people we hurt are the ones who loved us most. "I'm sorry." It disappeared after 24 hours, but the damage, and the healing, had already begun. For Can, that silent apology was enough. He didn't respond publicly. He didn't need to. He had already said everything that needed to be said. As the media storm calmed, his friends began to notice a new lightness in him. He was more open, more grounded. He had stopped running from the past. And for the first time in a long time, he was looking toward the future, not with regret, but with quiet hope. The weeks that followed were strangely peaceful. For once, Can Yaman wasn't rushing from one project to another, wasn't surrounded by cameras, wasn't running from the noise. He was living slower, quieter. Those close to him said it was as if he had finally exhaled after years of holding his breath. He spent more time by the sea. Early mornings became his favorite, the moment when the world was still half asleep and the sound of the waves drowned out everything else. He would sit on the sand with a notebook in his hand, writing thoughts that had been locked inside for too long. No scripts, no rehearsals, just truth. He wrote about love, about loss, about the strange beauty of heartbreak. He wrote about how the worst pain can sometimes lead to the greatest clarity. And in those quiet moments, he realized that gratitude was not weakness, it was power. He began to understand why he had said those words, "I should thank him." It wasn't about Sara's ex-husband as a person. It was about what that man represented, the ending that forced a new beginning. The destruction that cleared the path for growth. In interviews that came later, Ken spoke softly, but with conviction. When someone takes something from you, they're not always the villain. Sometimes they're just part of your story, the part that teaches you how to let go. Fans who once pitied him now admired him. He wasn't just the actor with the perfect smile anymore, he had become something else, human. Real. Vulnerable. He started turning down superficial roles, choosing scripts that meant something. Roles that mirrored the man he had become, imperfect, wounded, but alive. On set, colleagues said they could see the difference in his eyes. He wasn't performing anymore, he was living each scene. But behind that calm, there was still a spark of sadness. The kind that stays when you've truly loved and lost. Sometimes, in the middle of interviews or public appearances, his gaze would drift for a moment, as if his mind had wandered back to a time when things were simpler, when love still felt safe. Yet he didn't fight those memories anymore. He let them come, let them pass. They were part of him now, scars that no longer hurt, only reminded. In one rare interview, when asked what he would say if he ever met Sara's ex again, he smiled and replied, "Nothing. He already did what he was supposed to do. And I've already forgiven him." It was such a simple answer, yet it carried the weight of everything he had lived through. Forgiveness, not as a favor to others, but as a gift to himself. He had finally broken free from the loop of pain and resentment. And in that freedom, there was peace. It was late evening when Ken returned to the same city where everything had once begun. The streets were the same, the narrow alleys, the sound of passing scooters, the smell of espresso drifting through the air, but he was different. This time, he wasn't walking as a man haunted by memories. He was walking as someone who had made peace with them. He stopped in front of the little restaurant where he and Sara used to go after long days on set. The lights were still warm and soft, the same song played quietly through the open door. For a moment, he smiled. The pain that used to tighten his chest was gone, replaced by something gentler, nostalgia, not regret. He took a seat by the window, ordered a simple coffee, and watched people passing by. No one seemed to recognize him. And strangely, he liked it that way. For years, he had been the man everyone watched. Now, he was just another face in the crowd, and that anonymity felt like freedom. As he stirred his coffee, he opened his notebook, the same one he carried everywhere now. On the first page, he had written a single sentence, "Every ending teaches you how to love better." It wasn't something he had read, it was something he had lived. He began to write again, not about Sara, not about heartbreak, but about life. About how loss can lead to understanding, how pain can cleanse you, how forgiveness is the quietest form of strength. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. The anger, the confusion, the questions, they had all been replaced by clarity. He understood now that life isn't about avoiding pain, but learning from it. That love doesn't fail, people simply stop recognizing it. When a waiter brought his bill, he thanked him with a quiet smile. The young man, realizing who he was, froze for a second and said, "You're Yaman, right? I just want to say, your interview changed how I see love." Ken chuckled softly. "Then maybe all that pain wasn't useless after all," he replied. He stepped outside, the night breeze brushing against his face. The city lights reflected in his eyes like fragments of a story finally at peace. Somewhere inside, he knew he was ready, not for fame, not for applause, but for something real. He had learned that love doesn't always come with promises. Sometimes, it comes as a chance, a second one, after you've been broken and rebuilt. And though he didn't know what the future held, he no longer feared it. Because he had already survived the hardest part, losing himself and finding his way back. Later that night, he posted a photo, a simple image of the sea, calm and endless, with a caption that broke the internet once again: "Thank you. Not for the pain, but for what it taught me." Within hours, millions reacted. But for him, it wasn't about the likes or the comments. It was about closing a chapter that had defined too many of his days. He stood by the water, watching the reflection of the moon. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. He hesitated, then opened it. It was a single line: "I hope you find the love you've always deserved." He smiled, not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. He put the phone back in his pocket and whispered to the night, "I already have. It starts with me." And as the waves gently crashed against the shore, Yaman turned away, walking not into the past that once held him, but into a future he had finally made peace with. Because some stories don't end with revenge or regret. They end with gratitude. And his did, too, with 5 quiet words that changed everything: "I should thank him, really." And for the first time, the world finally understood, he meant it.